Emma was rinsing the last glass when her phone lit up on the counter. She reached for it with wet hands, not paying much attention until she saw the name on the screen. Her chest tightened. It was Daniel, her auntie's son. For a moment, she just stared at the glowing letters, certain her eyes were playing tricks. She hadn't spoken to him in years. Not since that wedding where their paths had crossed too closely, where his smile had lingered too long. She thought time had buried all of that. She thought she had buried it. But there he was, calling her now, in the middle of an ordinary evening. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She almost let it ring out, almost chose the safety of silence. But something inside her, a mix of curiosity and a pulse of nerves, pushed her to swipe. "Hello?" Her voice came out quieter than she expected. There was a pause, then a voice she knew instantly, though it carried a new depth. "Emma." Daniel said, like her name was something fragile. She blinked, her breath caught in her throat. That voice had grown older, richer, but it still carried the same warmth she remembered. She pressed the phone tighter to her ear, steadying herself. "Yes, it's me," she whispered, her tone unsure. A small laugh came from him, soft but real. "I wasn't sure you'd answer. It's been a long time." Her heart raced at the sound. Long time didn't even cover it. They hadn't shared a single word since that wedding night, when music had played in the background, and he had leaned closer to her than anyone else dared. She had tucked away that memory, convinced it was safer to forget. Now, hearing him, the walls she had built around it began to tremble. "What made you call?" she asked, hoping her voice sounded steady. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just thought of you." The simplicity of it shook her more than any elaborate reason could have. Thought of her. After all these years? After distance and silence. She tried to laugh it off to lighten the moment, but her lips only trembled. "Daniel, you surprised me. I didn't expect." She stopped herself, not sure what words to choose. His voice was calm, but carried an undertone that reached her heart. "I know. I didn't expect to call either. But I heard something today, and it reminded me of you. I couldn't shake it. I just wanted to hear your voice." Emma leaned against the kitchen counter, the cool surface pressing into her back. She didn't know what to say. No one ever called her for reasons like this. Conversations with friends were practical, predictable. But Daniel's words were different. They stirred something hidden. Something she had kept carefully tucked away. She forced herself to breathe. "I'm fine. Life's been normal. Busy with work, you know." He chuckled gently, like he already knew how she'd answer. "Still working at the design firm?" Her eyes widened. How did he remember that? She had mentioned it once, years ago, in passing. The fact that he held on to it made her chest ache. "Yes," she admitted. "You remember that?" "Of course," he said softly. "I remember more than you think." Emma's fingers tightened around the phone. A rush of old feelings washed over her, but she fought to keep her voice steady. "Well, that's kind of you to say." They fell into silence for a beat. The only sound was the hum of her fridge in the background and his faint breathing on the other end. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried weight, like words unsaid were hanging between them. "Emma," he said finally, "I'm sorry for calling out of the blue. I don't want to make things complicated." Her chest tightened at that word, complicated. Because that's exactly what this was, even if neither of them admitted it outright. Still, she found herself whispering back, "It's not complicated to talk. It's just unexpected." He laughed again, a low sound that made her smile despite herself. "Unexpected. Yeah? That's fair." For the next few minutes, they drifted into lighter topics. He told her about the city he'd moved to, the new job that left him exhausted but fulfilled. She shared little pieces of her own life, careful not to give too much away, yet unable to resist the way he listened. He didn't rush her. He didn't fill the space with empty chatter. He just let her talk, and it felt strangely safe. But then he said something that made her grip the counter harder. "Emma, it feels like nothing's changed. Like I'm talking to you exactly where we left off." Her heart skipped. Where we left off, he didn't need to explain. She knew he was remembering that whetting tooth, the way they had slipped outside for air, the way his eyes had lingered as if there was something he wanted to say but didn't. She had carried that moment for years, silently, secretly. And now hearing him speak as though he carried it too, left her trembling. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice thin. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I know," he replied, no hesitation in his voice. "But I had to." Her thoughts swirled. It wasn't just a phone call anymore. It was a doorway she wasn't sure she should open, but she couldn't bring herself to close either. She could almost see him in her mind, his steady gaze, the slight curve of his smile. It was dangerous, but it was real. "Maybe we should talk another time," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Yeah," he agreed gently, but his tone told her he wasn't ready to let go yet. "I'll call again if that's all right." Emma hesitated, then let out the faintest breath. "All right?" When the call ended, she stood there in silence, the kitchen suddenly too still. She stared at the phone in her hand, her heart still racing, her mind replaying every word. It had been years since she'd heard his voice, and yet tonight it felt as though no time had passed at all. But the truth pressed in on her. This wasn't just a call. This was the start of something she wasn't prepared for. And even as she told herself to put the phone down to forget, she knew deep inside she would be waiting for it to ring again. Emma sat on the couch long after the call ended, her phone still resting in her hand. The house was quiet, but her thoughts were anything but. She leaned back and closed her eyes, and suddenly the years seemed to peel away. Memories she thought were buried returned with sharp clarity. She could see Daniel at family gatherings, always a little apart from the others, always finding reasons to drift toward her. He wasn't loud like the rest of their cousins. He wasn't the center of every joke. Instead, he lingered in the background, watching, listening. And yet somehow, his presence always reached her first. She remembered one summer evening in her aunt's backyard, when the air smelled of barbecue and laughter filled the space. Daniel had been beside her on the porch, both of them escaping the noise. He had asked her simple questions about school, about her dreams. No one else in the family had cared enough to ask, but Daniel had listened with focus that made her feel seen. That was years ago, and still, the memory carried weight. And then there was the wedding, the night that changed everything. Emma could picture it clearly, the music echoing, the lights flickering across the room. She had gone outside for air, the dance floor too crowded, her emotions too tangled. Daniel had followed her. He didn't say much, but the way his eyes stayed on hers told her enough. They had stood in silence, a heartbeat too close, and though no words were spoken, she had felt something pass between them. Something unspoken, unacknowledged, but undeniably real. That was the last time they'd truly been alone. After that, she avoided him, convinced it was better to protect herself. It's better to lock away what she felt. But now, hearing his voice again, all those walls were crumbling. She tried to shake it off, telling herself he was just being kind, just reaching out his family. But the way he had said her name, the way he had admitted he remembered her work, the way his words carried softness, it was more than small talk. It was personal, deliberate, and she couldn't ignore it. The next evening, her phone rang again. She saw his name and froze. For a moment, she thought about letting it go to voicemail, but her heart had already decided. She answered. "Emma," he said, his voice softer this time, as if he wasn't sure how she'd respond. She swallowed. "Hi, Daniel." There was a pause, then a sigh. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," she admitted, her tone nervous but honest. "I'm glad you did." His voice carried warmth that made her chest ache. "I've thought of you often, more than I probably should have." Emma gripped the edge of the couch, her heart racing. She wasn't ready to hear that, yet part of her had been waiting for it. She lowered her voice. "Daniel, this isn't simple, I know," he said quickly. "I don't want to make things harder for you, but I can't pretend anymore. I've carried these feelings for years." Her breath caught. Feelings. He had said it out loud. She wanted to deny it, to push it away, but the truth was staring her in the face. She had carried them too, quietly, silently, always convincing herself they weren't real. And now, here he was, breaking the silence she thought would last forever. "Why now?" she whispered. "Because I can't keep it locked inside anymore," he replied. His tone was steady, but beneath it was a crack of vulnerability. "I thought if I stayed away, if I kept my distance, maybe it would fade. But it hasn't. It only grew stronger." Emma's heart twisted. Part of her wanted to hang up to escape before she got pulled deeper. But she couldn't. Something about hearing his truth unlocked her own. "Daniel, you don't understand what you're saying. If anyone knew, I don't care what anyone knows," he cut in gently but firmly. "All I care about is that you hear me. That you know I've always seen you differently. Not as family, not as a passing thought, but as someone who mattered to me." Her chest rose and fell quickly, her mind spinning. She knew he was crossing lines, lines they both understood, but the way he said it left her unable to breathe. She pressed a hand against her chest, trying to steady herself. "You shouldn't say these things," she whispered again, but her voice lacked strength. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but it's the truth." The silence that followed was heavy. Emma stared at the wall, her heart pounding in her ears. She could feel her life shifting, as if she stood on the edge of something she didn't choose but couldn't walk away from either. That night, after the call ended, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Every word replayed in her mind. She remembered his laugh, his pause before speaking, the way his voice lowered when he spoke of her. She had told herself for years that it was just her imagination, that she had misunderstood his attention. But now she couldn't deny it. He had confessed it openly. Her heart was restless. She thought of her family, of the gatherings, of the expectations. She thought of her Aunt Daniel's mother, who would never understand. The world around her would call it wrong, messy, forbidden. And yet, lying there in the dark, Emma couldn't quiet the part of her that felt something entirely different. A part of her felt alive, awakened by his voice, by the possibility that what she had secretly felt all along wasn't hers alone to carry. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she let herself remember without shame. She remembered his quiet eyes on her during dinners, his laughter slipping toward her direction, the way he always found her in crowded rooms. She remembered how safe she felt with him, how understood, and how much she had missed it. Emma turned on her side, clutching her pillow, her phone resting on the nightstand beside her. She knew it wasn't the end. She knew he would call again. And though she told herself she should stop it, deep inside she wanted that phone to ring. She wanted to hear his voice again, no matter the risk, no matter the consequences. Because Daniel wasn't just a memory anymore. He was present, reaching out, and she couldn't deny that part of her wanted to reach back. Emma woke the next morning with heavy eyes, but her mind was still buzzing from the night before. She dragged herself to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat at the table staring at her phone. Part of her hoped there would be no message, no call. Another part of her longed to see his name appear again. She hated that she felt that way, but the truth was undeniable. When the phone stayed silent, she felt both relief and disappointment. It was only mid-morning when it finally rang. His name lit up her screen, and her heart skipped. Without giving herself time to think, she answered, "Emma." His voice was softer than yesterday, almost careful. "Yes," she said quickly, afraid her hesitation might show. "I didn't wake you, did I?" he asked. "No," she replied, clutching the coffee mug. "I was just thinking about me." His question hung in the air, bold but fragile. Emma swallowed. She should have lied. She should have said no, but the truth slipped out in a whisper. "Yes." There was a silence on the line, heavy yet warm. Then he breathed out slowly, almost with relief. "I've been thinking about you all morning." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him to stop, to remind him of who they were, of the lines between them. But instead she found herself asking, "Why, Daniel? Why now?" "'Cause I'm tired of pretending," he said firmly. "I feel invisible in my own life. I smile, I work, I go through the motions, but no one sees me. except you. You always saw me, even back then. When I talked to you yesterday, it felt like breathing again." His words hit her like a wave. She remembered the way he used to. Look at her when she spoke, how he gave attention no one else did. She remembered how safe she had felt around him, even when she couldn't admit why. "Daniel," she said softly, "you're making this harder than it already is." "I don't want to make it hard," he replied quickly. "I just want to be honest. You've always been the one I could open up to. And maybe I shouldn't say it, but I can't hold it in anymore." Emma pressed her hand to her forehead. She wanted to shut it down, but every part of her leaned into his words. His honesty made her ache, because she felt it too. Their calls grew longer after that. Each day, sometimes in the morning, sometimes late at night, her phone would ring and she would answer. They spoke about everything: his job that drained him, her quiet evenings alone, the way both of them felt like outsiders in their own families. He confessed that he often felt unseen, like his life was moving but nothing meaningful was happening. She listened, her heart breaking for him. And every time, he ended up saying the words she feared but couldn't resist. "You're the only one who hears me." One evening, she sat curled up on the couch, his voice filling her ears as the rest of the house lay quiet. He told her about walking through the city, surrounded by crowds, yet feeling utterly alone. "Then I think of you," he said, "and suddenly I don't feel so lost. It's like you're the anchor I've been missing." Her chest ached. She closed her eyes, imagining him walking those streets, his voice echoing in her head. "Daniel," she whispered, "you can't put this weight on me. It's too much." "I don't mean to," he said softly, "but I don't know where else to put it. No one else understands." Tears stung her eyes. She hated how much his words moved her. She hated that she wanted to comfort him, to tell him she felt the same. She tried to remind herself of the truth. They were family, connected by bonds that should never blur. But every time she told herself to step back, she found herself leaning forward again, answering his calls, waiting for his voice. That night, after their call ended, Emma lay awake, staring into the darkness. She thought about the word he had used earlier, anchor. She realized she felt the same. For years, she had drifted through her life, busy with work, but empty inside. Friends came and went, relationships never lasted. But now, every time he spoke, she felt grounded, alive, like someone truly knew her. Her phone buzzed again, startling her. Another message from him? "I don't know what this is, but I don't want it to stop." Emma stared at the words, her fingers trembling. She typed and erased a dozen replies. Finally, she sent only 3 words. "Neither do I." The next day, guilt hit her like a storm. She told herself it had gone too far. She couldn't let it continue. But when he called again, her heart betrayed her, and she answered. "Emma," he said quietly, "tell me to stop and I will. Just say the word." She froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She couldn't say it. She wanted to, but the truth was stronger. Her silence told him everything. "Then I'll keep calling," he said gently, almost like a promise. She closed her eyes, her breath shaky. She wanted to believe it was harmless, just words, just connection. But deep down, she knew it was more. She knew they were stepping into dangerous territory. Still, she didn't stop him. That evening, sitting by her window, Emma whispered too. Herself, "What are you doing?" She thought of her aunt, of her family, of what people would say if they knew. But then she thought of Daniel's voice, of the way it steadied her, the way it made her feel like she wasn't alone in the world. And she couldn't let it go. The line between right and wrong blurred more with every call. She told herself it was only words, only comfort, but her heart knew better. His voice was becoming a part of her days, and his absence was unthinkable. One night, as the call was ending, his voice lowered. "Sometimes I think we were meant to find each other this way." Even if no one else understands, her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but the truth was, she felt it too. That night, she lay awake again. words repeating in her mind, meant to find each other. She knew the world wouldn't see it that way. She knew people would never accept it. But as her eyes closed, she also knew something else. Daniel wasn't just her aunt's son anymore. He was the one who had found the part of her no one else ever touched. And she didn't know if she could let that go. Emma sat at her desk late in the evening, papers scattered but untouched. She tried to focus on work, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone. The silence in the room felt heavier than usual, like the air was waiting. When the phone finally lit up, her heart jumped. His name again? She hesitated for only a moment before answering. Emma. Daniel said, his voice low, almost uncertain this time. I need to ask you something. Her hand tightened around the phone. What is it? She asked, bracing herself. There was a pause, long enough for her heart to pound louder in her ears. Then he whispered, I wish I could see you. Just once, to sit across from you and talk, face to face. No screens, no calls, just us. Emma's breath caught. She turned toward the window, the night outside reflecting her own confusion. Seeing him, that was the one thing she had told herself she must never allow. It would make everything real, would turn words into something heavier. And yet the thought of it pulled at her like gravity. She closed her eyes. Daniel, that would change everything. I know, he said softly, but I need to see you. Even if it's only once, even if we say nothing at all. Her heart raced. She imagined it too easily, the way he would look at her, the way silence between them would speak louder than words. It terrified her, but it also stirred a longing she couldn't deny. This isn't simple, she whispered, her voice breaking. It was never simple, he replied. The words hung in the air, and she had no defense against them, 'cause he was right. From the very beginning, nothing about this had been simple. And yet, here they were, circling closer with every call. That night. After they hung up, Emma sat in the dark with tears stinging her eyes. She pressed her palms together, whispering to herself, what are you doing? She knew the risks. She knew the rules. But her heart kept betraying her, leading her down a path she didn't know how to leave. The next evening, he called again. But this time his tone was different, gentler, almost broken. Emma, I don't want to make your life harder. I don't want to cause you pain, but keeping this inside is worse. I think about you all the time. Try to bury it, but I can't. Her throat tightened. She wished she could tell him to stop, to walk away, to let go. But the truth was, she couldn't imagine life without these calls anymore. They had become the highlight of her days, the quiet anchor in her nights. Daniel, she whispered, sometimes what feels right in the heart isn't easy in the world. He was quiet for a long time. She almost thought he had ended the call. Then he sighed, a sound full of weight. I just needed you to know. Those words broke her more than anything else he had said. He wasn't asking for promises. He wasn't demanding answers. He just wanted her to know. And in that moment, she realized that knowing was both a gift and a burden. After the call ended, Emma sat alone in her living room, the glow of the phone screen fading into darkness. She thought about how easily her life could have continued without him, quiet, predictable, safe. And yet, deep down, she knew she would have carried the silence of what was left unsaid. Now, she had no silence. She had his words echoing in her heart, reshaping her days, keeping her awake at night. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights, wondering if he was looking at the same sky. She wrapped her arms around herself, whispering, why does it have to feel like this? The next morning, she woke with swollen eyes, but a steady resolve. She told herself she would not answer if he called again. She told herself it was time to draw a line, to protect herself and the fragile balance of her world. But when the phone rang that night, her heart betrayed her again. She answered. His voice came softly, almost like a confession. I didn't think you'd pick up. I shouldn't have, she admitted. I know, he said, but you did. And that means something. She pressed her lips together, unable to argue. because he was right again. Her actions spoke louder than her words. No matter what she told herself, she couldn't walk away. That evening, they spoke less, their silences longer, heavier. It wasn't about filling space anymore. It was about being present, about holding on to something they both feared would slip away. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "Maybe we don't need to have all the answers. Maybe it's enough to know what we feel." Emma closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling unevenly. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to live in that fragile bubble where only the two of them existed, untouched by the outside world. But she knew life wasn't that simple. When they said goodnight, Emma didn't hang up right away. She listened to the silence on the line, the faint sound of his breathing before finally letting go. And when she did, it felt like a piece of her went with him. Days passed, but the echo of his voice remained. She moved through her routine's work, errands, family calls, but everything felt different now. The weight of what he had said, of what she had admitted without words, lingered in every quiet moment. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, she whispered to herself, "There's no going back now." She knew that even if nothing more ever happened, even if they never saw each other, she would carry this forever. His voice had carved its place in her heart. It wasn't a story of resolutions or promises. It was a story of longing, of connection that defied the rules but refused to be silenced. And as Emma sat there in the fading light, she knew that her life would never return to what it had been before that first unexpected call. Daniel's words would live inside her, not as an ending, but as a question, one she would carry quietly, secretly, for the rest of her days.